This is the Pawn Sacrifice channel, and this, believe it or not, is part 50 of the 924S turbo build. At the end of the last video, we here had the engine all looking in, so that's the 1.8 turbo 20 valve from a VW Passat, and also a A6 and a few other cars as well. And yeah, it's all looking pretty good. The wiring is the obvious mess, and so we need to get on and sort the electrics before we can put some fluids in and look at getting the car started. I'll be completely honest with you, this I think is probably the thing that I've been least looking forward to, because car electrics are an absolute mystery to me. So part of what I'm going to do with this video as I go along is try and explain certain things of how things work, just in case it's of use to anyone else, because I've been really struggling to get my head around a few things, and then they just reach the point where certain bits and pieces click and it all makes sense. Oh yeah, okay, being a bit dumb. So yeah, if that's you, I didn't mean to call you dumb, but you know, this is for you. Anyway, we've got the original Porsche wiring, and this is a 9-pin connector that I'm holding in here. And this brings all of the power through, and essentially this plugged into the wiring loom that went to the engine, which went back to the ECU through the firewall underneath the steering wheel. So I need to find a way of making these things, or some way of getting, you know, the activities that were going on here to work with this. This is the, actually I've just noticed it's Audi branded Bosch ECU. I actually sent this away, it was an eBay service, so I bought it and then sent it straight off to be decoded, to have the immobilizer removed, because otherwise we're not going to be starting at all for that reason. So yeah, that's hopefully all ready to go, and that is going to connect into these two. So the two, I'm not sure why there's two plugs. The Porsche just has one larger one, but yeah, two plugs on here, and this is essentially what connects through. And then on the other end of this, there's a load of stuff going on in the engine bay and a lot of things plugged in. We also have, so where the Porsche had the 9-pin socket, and I think there's another 2-pin one for the starter motor, this has all of these things. Clearly within, you know, after about 20 years, things change significantly, and there's a lot more things going on here. So basically I need to go through and redecipher these. We'll come back to these in a minute when I start going through everything. So I've already been making lists of things. This has been based on what I've seen on the internet, what I've had a look at, and I'll kind of show you how I've been finding out where things are and what things do. Been using this quite a lot, so what I have been doing is, in the manual there's a list and it tells you which pin on here does what, and then I've essentially been setting this and going through and doing the continuity testing. If you're new to that, then I'll just show you in a second exactly what's involved with that. And yeah, the other thing which we are going to be using with some of this, just because I want to go through and double check everything, is this. And it's obviously a light, so this is the light from the rear. It's a 12-volt light, so connecting it up and giving it all the juice from the battery, it's just going to take as many amps as it needs. I'm not going to overload it, but what it will show me is if I interrupt whatever circuit I'm doing with this, it's going to show me whether I've got that right or not. So we'll have a look at that in a little moment. So I just need to think where to start, and then we'll pick it straight up. So quick, very novice thing, just because it took me some work to go and find this. So if you're looking at this for the electric stuff, just a quick thing on continuity testing. So I've got a Draper multimeter here, and it does have a little continuity test mode. So it's a little speakery type thing. So I just basically turn that all the way around to there. And when I get there, it comes up with a number 1. And essentially what you're doing with this is just testing the connectivity between the wires. So you sort of go ahead and connect to one point as I have there, and then with the other you basically touch the other end and it gives you a 0 and a noise if it's right. If it isn't going all the way down to 0, then there's some issues with the wire and it probably needs some attention. So what I've done with this is actually go through the wiring loom, as I mentioned, so all the connectors that are on the car, like for instance the core pack connectors, which go through something that I've forgotten the name of, but it's prone to connecting. So I plugged everything in as it should be, and then just went through the pins on the ECU end, put one end in there, and then went through all of the terminals and just made sure everything was going to 0 and beeping. So thankfully that all seems to be right. So yeah, just a quick check in there. So for anyone that doesn't know what they're doing, don't worry, it's not all going to be like this, but I just want to kind of explain for people some of the things that I've had to learn along the way, even if it seems very basic to you. Next trick we're going to look at, or not trick, the next thing we'll look at is actually using the light bulb to help me go through and decode some of the things on the Porsche side. Okay, the next thing I'm just going to show you in terms of what I've been doing to work this out, in case it's of use to anyone, is just using a light to confirm what I believe about the original Porsche circuits. So it's a bit of a pain because everything's plugged into the main board. So I've got the power coming down to here, then back through the firewall, that's going to the main relay and fuse board. I need to basically run off of that for this because I need lights, horn, wipers and other things that help this car to be road legal and safe. So there's a whole load of stuff which needs to stay, but I need to find out what I can use from these connectors that are already there. The information that I've got from Pelican Parts, which have been really useful. Somebody shared some PDFs on there for the wiring diagrams, which have been really valuable. But there does seem to be a slight variation between country and between year in terms of pin location. So I just want to verify that, although the wiring colour seems to be fairly consistent in terms of what goes where. So all I'm doing with this is connecting the black side to a ground. It doesn't matter on the colour side because this is essentially just a connection straight through here. What I have done is bypass the switch and then just clamped it on right next to where it connects to the bulb so that I can see that. And what I've got down here, which you probably can't see, just there, is a 2-pin connector which it says is for the starter motor. So this would be a handy one for me to reuse, so the thing obviously turn the key and then it does its business. So this, and not that I've filmed this before, but I suddenly have props to hand, but so you can actually see what's going on here. Obviously you don't need to bother with this too much, I'm doing it yourself. And the other thing that I've got, I hope, if I haven't lost it, or maybe I left it in the car, oh no, it's in my back pocket, is the key to go and give this a quick whirl. So connected to the starter, key in, nothing, turn 1, nothing, turn 2, nothing, turn 3, and there we have it's turning when it goes to the starter position, so that's actually obviously the correct cable. So I was fairly confident with that one that it was what it said it was. And actually, I've labelled it. I've actually been through this before. I'm not going to go through all of these, but I'll just show you just for another one. So this is, I can't remember. I think this might be the fuel injectors. I haven't actually labelled this up, but yeah. So I've got that red and blue cable there. That's all connected up. So let's just quickly have a look. So ignition's in position 2 and the light is still working. So that's great. That's showing that that is what it says it is. The other thing that I've done or have been doing is just doing this, and then I'll go and unplug the relevant relay or fuse or what have you, just to double, triple check everything. And in fact, I'm going to go through and do all of this again and just make sure that everything's spot on, because again, paranoid and I don't know what I'm doing. So that was me just whipping through, having a look at the connectors, double and triple checking. I've basically went through and flagged in blue the ones that I'm going to be using. So we've got coils, injectors, 12 volt for the ECU itself, the fuel pump. So this is the fuel pump relay ground. So this will hopefully send a signal to the DME relay, which is still there. I'd like to just use that. So basically send that signal to the relay and then fire up the fuel pump. So hopefully that's going to work. And then the final one that we've got for the moment is the data link connector. And this will hopefully allow me to get this working. So the next thing I'm going to be doing is just having a quick fiddle around and go through and just double and triple check the identity of these suckers and make sure they align to the pins. And this will then give me the data connector for OBD2. So there's a K-link, couple positives and a ground in there that I need to identify. And then I'll basically just run through and get those connected up when I'm doing everything else. The good thing is if I can get this going and plugged in, once the ECU is connected and powered on, I'll be able to then just see that it's got sight of everything else that it needs to have sight of. So hopefully this is going to work. I finished off putting all of this lot together and got the wiring in for the water pump. The water pump ECU thing clips on there. There's a couple that I've left off which were for LEDs or an LED. With the tails that are coming out here, that one I've capped off for now. These are going to connect into essentially the things that I've got on the other end. So that's all done. So what I should mention though is this is obviously not going to be the finished solution. Everything's a right mess. Where I've got the factory Porsche connections, a lot of these wires are going to be unused now and make no sense. I just want this where I can see it. I've got the relays here are acting as the switched ignition, and they're running off of a trigger inside. That will obviously be switching to run off of the ignition. The relay here, which is after the switch ignition through the fuse and to the relay, which is the order in which it should run and which it will run once everything gets into the car. So yeah, it's pretty much ready to give everything a go. What I want to do is, before I start connecting everything up to this loom, is just run through here, get the battery reconnected, and then run through these bits and just basically just check each of the outputs and make sure they're behaving in the way that I expect. The only thing I can't check is the fan, because that's controlled by the water pump, and I don't want to do anything with the water pump just yet. So what I am going to do though in the meantime, or just before I start doing all of that, is start putting some fluids in the car. So I went out and bought some petrol yesterday. That's gone in, and obviously it's not pumping through, so I haven't tested the system yet. So I need to get coolant in and also some oil as well. I'll connect the battery up, switch it on, check that nothing goes pop, switch it off again, and then plug in the ECU, and I'll find the ODB reader as well. So nothing alarming has happened, which means it's time to connect the ECU and the ODB reader up. Let's now try this again. So the ODB or OBD2 thingy didn't read anything. So I've connected what I believe to be the switch signal to the relay, the Porsche one, to tell the fuel pump to go and do its business, and that should be connected up now. So things were working and playing nicely, and then I heard a noise from the back. That was one of the lines wasn't properly tightened. With these things, there's so many different bits. I think I was trying to tighten something that was already tight, and then there's another bit after that. So I think hopefully that's sorted. What I'm going to do now is I've just unplugged again the injectors and the fuel pump. So what I'm going to do is just crank the engine a couple of times, and hopefully there's no fuel in there, there's no nothing, and it's just going to start moving the oil around the system. Unfortunately, I don't actually have a way of checking that. Okay, I'm going to give another quick check, and then at the back around where the fuel is, and then let's give this a try and just see if it'll start for a second or two. Okay, I need to have a look and see what's going on at the back. I've just gone to get the spanner, and there is definitely petrol stuff going on there, which there shouldn't be, so I need to get that cleaned up. Toot sweet. Following day after the shenanigans, catastrophe and what have you, I'm not going to recreate the fuel problem at the back. So what I'm going to do is just start chucking some water in here, and it'll just need to do its business, and then we'll see how much water is coming out. With this again, I've really tightened everything down. Yeah, that could have gone better. Not much more could have gone worse. I mean, if it was fluids, it was pretty much trying to leave the car as quickly as possible. The pump housing, so I've got a feeling this similar to what I did on the back. This is part of my 3D printing learning experience. With this particular problem, I think what I'm annoyed about is I've broken this completely when I've been taking the hose off because it was on there too tight. So I couldn't see actually what the problem was. I think that might have been down a bit tight there as well. Although it's not compressed it, which is good, and gone in. I think at the front it was possibly not flat enough. It's a bit of a odd one, the things that happened when you do 3D printing. So I need to investigate this and decide what my next move is in terms of how that's going to go. But other than that, water flow was actually pretty good. I had a bit of a leak on top of the radiator, which I was slightly worried about because I thought I couldn't really see where it was coming from, and everything seemed to be okay. But it turns out my JDM spec zip ties that were holding the top hose on weren't quite up to standard. I just put them on there as a temporary measure. Bizarrely or stupidly, to be completely honest, I had a bunch of clips arrive, hose clips arrive, and wondering why I'd ordered so many and I had so many spare left over. Well, zip tying or cable tying the hoses on was the reason why. So what's happened next? Oil leaks. So actually the oil leaks not too bad. There was a bit of one out the sump because I hadn't tightened that up enough, but more importantly the sump itself isn't leaking. The oil filter housing, where the connectors are going into there, they need doing up. I think I probably stopped short of where I needed to go. And then finally was the around the top of the turbo. The positive I'm taking away from that is I've had my little claw things for about, well, I don't know, years now, and never actually used them. I bought them to do a job and then ended up not needing them. So that's allowed me to get on and tighten that up. So hopefully that'll be okay when the oil starts going around. The biggest concern, actually probably the biggest concern, if I'm completely honest, is the water pump, because that's something that I need to get made up. So I'm going to have a look at some options on that as to whether I have another go at this, bearing in mind the rear thing seems to have gone on okay. I haven't seen any leaks there, but who knows on that. But no, is the fuel. So where the fuel pump is, that's leaking just around the top, but now when that's depressurized, which it should have done by now, I should be able to have just a quick look and see. I suspect there's some surface corrosion, so I just need to do that and pop the washers back. More worryingly is on top of the fuel filter, so I need to have a look at that because I'm not quite sure. Oh, and the other issue is obviously before everything started flooding out, the car wasn't starting. So that's, I'm feeling slightly calm about that, because I found out something last night when I was going through and having a look, which is the ECU that I bought was from the AGU version of the 1.8T, which is a drive-by-cable version. So a lot of people have said it's a plug-and-play upgrade for this car because it's slightly newer software on it. But I think the one that I've got is too new and therefore isn't fully compatible. So I'm hoping that that's what's causing the problem. Also, I sent it off ages ago. I thought I was going to hear about a year ago. I sent it off so long ago to get the immobiliser de-thingied, so that I could actually start it with a normal key. And I'm not entirely sure how well that's been done, or whether if you just leave it, it goes completely dead and it's now come back to life and factory reset because it's been without power so long. So I'm not quite sure. I've got an AEB one on the way, so hopefully that's going to work and it's going to be demobilised. That should be here by the end of the week. So I'm going to kind of get on with other things and just see what happens there. So yeah, it's been a bit of a painful learning experience. On the plus side, actually, the electrics that I've done seem to be okay. As I've said before, this is just temporary. This is me putting things out so I can see what's where and what have you. And the reason for trying to get the car started and everything like that is just to get this snag in this. So yeah, who knows what's going to happen next time. You know, it couldn't have gone much worse. I didn't catch on fire, as somebody in the comments suggested on the last one, so that's a plus, although I don't really want to tempt fate there. I think probably tomorrow at some point, once I've been in there airing the garage out a bit more, I'll get on and have a look at the connections on the fuel side around the fuel filter housing, and everything else as well, and just to see if I can get to grips with exactly what's gone wrong there. But yeah, as always, thanks for watching, and let's see where we get next time.